Hi Year 8, welcome back to your next YouTube history lesson with me, Miss Thika. Today for our second lesson on our new topic, which is women throughout history, we are going to be thinking about crime and women. So we're going to be thinking about some of the common crimes committed by women during the medieval period and how women were punished in the medieval period too. So make sure you've got a pen and paper. Get down today's title for me, please. How were women punished in medieval England? And to start off with, we're going to start with a little multiple choice quiz. Obviously, I know that says stick it in your book, but obviously we can't do that. So as soon as you've got your title down, let's get going with the quiz. So hopefully you can see this. I know it's a bit small. I've struggled to get it all on the screen, to be honest. Hopefully you can see that. Question 1. When did the Jack the Ripper crimes take place? A. December to March 1889, B. August to November 1888, or C. August to November 1815. 2. Where did the Ripper crimes take place? A. Edinburgh, B. Liverpool, C. London. 3. How many known murders was the Ripper credited with? 5, 12, or 8? 4. Jack the Ripper was not the original name given to this case. What was the original name? A. Jack Attacks, B. The London Strangler, or C. The Whitechapel Murders. 5, and you should know this if you did the last lesson, women in ancient Greek period were not allowed to vote. True or false? 6. What type of women did Jack usually target? A. Jewish women, B. Lower class women, mostly prostitutes, or C. Upper class women. 7. The Roman women were said to be what in battle? A. Weak, B. Fierce, C. Fast. And the last one. Women in medieval England who studied medicine were sometimes accused of what crime? So this is again from the previous lesson. A. Lying, B. Murdering men, or C. Witchcraft. So if I've read that a bit fast, pause me now, try to answer all these questions, and then I'll go through the answers. Okay, answers. Number 1 was B. The Ripper crimes took place between August and November 1888. 2 is C. The crimes took place in London. 3 is A. There were 5 known murders. 4. The Jack the Ripper case was originally known as the Whitechapel murders because Whitechapel was the area in London where the murders took place. 5 is true. Women in ancient Greek period were not allowed to vote. 6. The type of women that Jack tended to target was B. Lower class women, mostly prostitutes. 7 was B. Women in Roman times in battle were said to be fierce. And finally, number 8. Women in medieval England who studied medicine were accused of C. Witchcraft. So let's get going. Last lesson, we considered the role of women in 3 different time periods. The ancient time period, the medieval time period, and then we took it up to World War I time period. Today we are focusing on the medieval period as a whole, and we're going to be focusing particularly on the crimes committed by women and the types of punishment they received for these crimes. So before we look at crimes, we are going to study an image and do a little bit of reading first. So obviously ignore the bit where it says stick in this image because you obviously can't do that. But what the image shows, and you should be able to see it clearly in a second when I go on to the next slide, this is an image of a medieval man and woman, and they have been split in half. So on the one side, you can see the woman here, she's got a dress on, she's got long curly hair. And on the other side here, you can see that this is a man, he's wearing a hat, and you can sort of see his facial hair a little bit there. what this image shows, or what it's trying to show, is it's showing the key differences between men and women in terms of what they believed in medieval England. So it's not just split in half, but it's also split in the middle as well. So there are 4 different sections to this image. Each of them have bizarre sort of little symbols that go in each quarter of the image, and all of that is going to be explained in a second when you give this information a read. So when I put the next slide on, we're going to read it together, and then I would like you to complete at least these first 2 questions for me, please, and then the challenge question if you can. Bullet point the key differences between men and women. Explain why men thought that they were superior in comparison to women naturally. Superior means better than, so why did men think they were better than women? And 3, if you can, what impact do you think this had on crime and punishment? So here's the information. I know it's a little bit small, I might just maybe make that bold so you can maybe see it a bit better. Hopefully that's helped. And this is the image here. Again, sorry, bear with. I might just squidge that in a little bit so that I can make that a tad bigger. So hopefully you can see that a bit better. So image split in half, woman on this side, man on that side, but the word also means this. It's saying that men are hot and dry, but it's also referring to women as being cold and wet. So what does that actually mean? So you're going to give this information a little bit of a read once I get this into the screen. Yep, sorry. So we're going to read this together, and then I'd like you to try and answer these questions at the top that I've just gone over, okay? So, in the medieval period, much of our medical understanding was based on the Hippocratic ideas of the 4 humours, which is why this image is split into 4 sections. This was the idea that we have 4 different types of liquid in our bodies, and if these liquids become unbalanced, then we become unwell. However, this was also used to explain the differences between men and women. Women were explained to be cold and wet, whereas men were considered to be hot and dry. For example, it was believed that women suffered more from a cold than a man would, resulting in women being naturally weaker and less controlled bodies and minds in comparison to men. Also, because women were wet and not dry like men, women were considered to be irrational. Irrational means you don't think straight. Irrational and not being able to cope with large quantities of information, unlike men who were dry, and therefore they could be well educated because they could cope with the information. In medieval times, men were taught that the male body expresses strength, sharp understanding and independence, whereas the female body expresses softness, which determines women for motherhood. The weak and soft, delicate skin of a woman proved that she was bound for a peaceful family life. Any woman who did not match this stereotype was severely punished. Therefore, women would often receive much harsher punishments than men for the same crime. So what I would like to do is, and I will go back if you can't, I'm hoping you can see that. Actually, if I get rid of this information here, then I'll be able to make that bigger and you'll be able to see it. Sorry. Bear with me, the joys of having to faff on with your PowerPoint over a live lesson. Bullet point the key differences between men and women as stated in this information. Then explain why men thought that they were more superior than women naturally. So explain the differences in bodies, in structures, in temperaments, in characters, that kind of thing. Then if you can, as a challenge question, what impact do you think this had on crime and punishment in medieval period? So pause me now and complete this task, please. Okay, so just to go over this really quickly before we move on. Key differences between men and women. What we can see is that people in medieval times are using their rather limited scientific understanding of illness, the idea that we have certain liquids in our body that make us poorly. So if we have a cold, then we've got a runny nose, so we've got too much phlegm, too much snot, that makes us sick. We all have bile in our stomach, but when we're unwell and we have too much bile, we are sick and we vomit, and that makes us unwell. They've then used that and applied it to men and women to explain why we are different, and obviously that's resulted in a little bit of stereotyping in terms of why we are the way that we are. So for example, it says here that women suffer more badly from a cold than men, which made men to believe that women were weaker and had less control over their bodies and their minds in comparison to men. There's no scientific proof behind that women suffer from a cold more than men. It just completely depends on the structure of your body and your immune system as to how you fight a cold. But that led them to believe that women were the weaker sex, not just in terms of the structure of their body, but also their mind, which then led on for men to think that women couldn't have an education, that they shouldn't go to school and they shouldn't go to universities, because it says here that women were irrational and they weren't able to cope with large quantities of information. So this kind of comes from the idea that women just didn't have the mental understanding to be educated in the same way that men did. So it was really difficult if a woman wanted to gain an education, she wasn't able to access that unless you were from a really rich, well-off family. You might be able to afford a private tutor. Even still, girls weren't taught the same thing as men. So even if you were from a really well-off family, if you had a daughter, you might pay for a tutor to come and teach her embroidery, so how to knit or how to sew, maybe how to cook, potentially how to read and write, but certainly that wouldn't be to the same level of what boys were taught. So even from a really young age, girls were encouraged to be a certain way and to think a certain way, and they used the theory of the four humours as evidence to back that up. In addition, it says down here, which you could have used for question 2, men were taught that their bodies were strong, that they had good levels of understanding, that they were independent, whereas women were taught that their bodies were soft, they were weak, they were delicate, and that their main purpose was to be a mother. And then it goes on to say that any women that didn't fall into that category were often punished for that, and that's what we're going to look at now. So normally I would do this by splitting you into groups and you would work around the room, but obviously we can't do that, so I've had to think on my feet a little bit. I should have sent you this via email, and I'll have put it on class charts as well. You don't have to use the table that I've sent you. You can obviously just draw it out if you want to, that's fine, but I think this is probably going to be the easiest way to do it. What I'm going to do is I am going to put 4 images on the screen for you to study. So it'll say crime 1, crime 2, crime 3 and crime 4. I want you to pause me and really look at that image. And in your first box here, I want you to record what crime do you think that woman has committed and what punishment do you think they are receiving. So it's just going to be a complete guess based on no evidence. You're just studying the image and you're telling me what you can infer, what can you learn from that image. And then in your first box you would write your prediction, your guess. What crime do you think the woman has committed and what punishment do you think she is receiving? Then once we've guessed for all 4, then I'll go back up to the top and I'll give you the information explaining what crime was committed and what punishment this woman received for you to then record the correct information in here and get a little bit more extra detail. And then at the end, once we've finished, if you wanted a little bit of challenge, you could think about a modern day comparison. So if that crime was committed today, how would the woman be punished? Would she be punished? Is it a crime? Is it punishable by law? And then you can maybe get a little bit of a comparison here. So I hope that makes sense. So either use the table electronically that I've sent you, or if you just want to work on paper, draw out this table for me and just do it that way. Yeah, so if you are drawing it out, pause me now so you can use this, but if not, you need to have this table open on your computer so you can type as we go. Okay, so crime number 1, your guess is going in this first box here. So have a good look at all of the characters, have a think about what you think's going on here. You're thinking about the crime. What might this woman have done to receive this punishment here? And then it's going in your first box. So record that in crime 1, box 1 for me, please. Your prediction. If I'm going too fast, obviously feel free to just pause me. Number 2. What crime do you think this woman's committed? And what punishment do you think she's having? Crime number 3, bit of an odd one. What punishment do you think this is? And what crime do you think a woman would have to have committed in order to be punished with this? This is quite a tricky one. People tend to find this one hard. And last one, crime 4. What crime do you think these 2 women committed, and what punishment do you think is happening to them? Okay, so far it should just be this column here that's completed, just your predictions, because I haven't, come back, because I haven't given you any information yet. So it should just be prediction 1, 2, 3 and 4 so far. Okay, so now I'm going to give you the information that you need to get down a detailed explanation, and try to make it as detailed as you can. What crime was committed and what punishment did women receive for this crime? So crime number 1, let's have a recap. That was this picture here, and that's this information. Crime number 1. Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII and Queen of England in 1536. Anne was accused of plotting to kill Henry and having a sexual relationship with her own brother, which, can I say, is not true. She did not have sex with her own brother. That was just used as evidence to try and get her. These allegations were never proven in court. Various men who worked closely with Henry at court disapproved of Anne and wanted rid of her. Henry's advisors had already lined up Henry's next wife, Jane Seymour, who they wanted to be queen. But in order to make Jane Seymour queen, they had to get rid of Anne Boleyn first. Henry showed Anne a small mercy by granting her request to die by the sword rather than an axe. Anne was found guilty of high treason. High treason is the crime, and the crime is the plans to kill the king. And she was executed on Tower Green on the 19th of May, 1536. But it wasn't just queens who could be killed for cheating on their husbands. Ordinary women could also be killed for cheating or being accused of cheating. So you didn't even have to be caught in the act. It literally just being accused of cheating was enough. Every husband was considered to be the king of their wife. Even if you're just an ordinary man, your wife is below you, so you are her king. Therefore, to cheat on your husband was to commit a crime called petty treason, which means little treason. So to kill a little king, if that makes sense. And your punishment, to have your head chopped off. So use this information, pause me because I know there's quite a lot on there and I've read through it quite quickly. Complete the second box. What is the crime here? Not only the crime committed by Anne, well, supposedly committed by Anne Boleyn, but also by ordinary women. And what was the punishment of that crime? Number 2, let's have a look back. Okay, here we've got someone tied up on this chair, arms out. Let's see. Crime 2. Perhaps the most common of crimes in the medieval period was theft of low-value goods, so things like bread and food. This was often punished by a form of public humiliation or mutilation. Women were more likely to steal during this period, as they were often the main caretakers of the family. E.g., women who were widowed, that means if your husband's died, you become a widow, or their husbands could not work, would turn sometimes to stealing in order to feed their family. Lower class women struggled to get jobs, especially once they were married, but even with a job, women were paid significantly less than men, and therefore sometimes they just had no other choice but to steal, or they could potentially starve to death, or their children could starve to death. The crime of theft could be punishable by flogging. Flogging is another term for whipping someone on the back, cutting off one or both ears, or even cutting off a hand, which is what we see going on in this image here. She's having her hand cut off. Even the loss of an ear made a woman's shame permanently visible. Everyone in the local area would be aware of her crime, and this would tarnish her reputation forever. So it's not just the pain of having an ear cut off or your hand cut off, which would be absolutely excruciating. They do it on purpose. It's the shame that comes with it, because no matter how much you try to hide it, you might put a hat on to try and cover up the fact that you're missing your ears, but how are you going to hide the fact that you've only got one hand? So it was also a way of embarrassing women for the rest of their lives for the fact that they'd committed the crime of theft. So again, second box, what's the crime? What's the punishment? Number 3, this one tends to confuse people, and they sometimes find this a little bit creepy, which I agree is a bit creepy. Crime number 3. Sorry. Okay, so the image that you saw for crime number 3 was known as a scold's bridle, or it was sometimes called the Branks bridle. This was an instrument of punishment used to torture and publicly humiliate women. A bridle is a form of equipment that you put on the head of a horse in order to ride the horse. So it's made out of leather. You put the little bit of metal over the horse's tongue, and it has reins on it so you can then sit on the horse and steer it. So this is the same thing. This goes over the face of the woman. It's attached. She can't take it off. This device was an iron muzzle that enclosed the head and prevented the woman from using her mouth. The woman would not be able to eat or speak whilst she was wearing the bridle. The bridle was used as punishment for rude women who were considered to be spending too much time gossiping or arguing with their husbands. It came complete with a bell on top of it. I'll go back. There it is. It came complete with a bell on top, so if the husband wanted, he could walk his wife around the village for everyone to see her. This was a form of public humiliation. It was aimed to remind women of the dangers of gossip, particularly gossip about men. Women were not meant to speak badly of their husbands or any other man, even if that man had committed a horrible crime against them. So there are examples when I did a particular course at university about women in pre-industrial Europe, even if a woman had tried to report a man for rape, this would be her punishment for speaking badly about the man, if you can believe that. Even if a man had committed a crime against a woman, e.g. rape, the woman could be punished with the bridle to stop her from speaking out against him. So again, go back. Number 3. The crime, well, the crime is gossip or speaking badly. That was considered a crime. And what punishment did women receive? And last one, sorry, I've got my numbers all muddled up here. Change that to a 4. In the medieval period, poverty was an extreme problem, and the poor received little help or support. Those who could not find work often wandered from village to village begging. These people were known as vagrants. People often associated vagrants with bad behaviour. In 1482, the City of London stated, "Misguided and idle women daily vagrant by walking the streets. These women encourage sin." Homeless women, ungoverned, they could not be controlled by men, were free to move around the city, which often offended people. Female vagrants were treated very harshly and were commonly whipped. So if we go back, this is what we can see here. So it's not just women, there are some men in the background there also being whipped in the streets. And their crime was essentially that they were homeless, they were poor. Those who were unable to work had to carry a begging licence, but every effort was made to force beggars to work, and those who refused were branded with the letter V for vagrant on their cheek or forehead. To brand is where you use a metal, so you would shape the metal into the shape of a V, like a hot poker. You would make it red hot and then you would burn their skin so it would leave a scar forever. So again, last one. What is their crime? And how were women punished for this? And then if you can, the challenge section, sorry my emails keep going off, the challenge section, compare this to modern standards. Is this even a crime today? And if it is a crime, how would they be punished for it? So the first one, for example, to cheat on your husband, is that a crime? Is there a punishment with it? To steal, is that a crime? Yes, but what sort of punishment would you receive from that today? To gossip or to talk badly about men, and finally to be poor, to be homeless, is that a crime? And how does that compare to modern day standards? Okay, last thing, little plenary before we go. So what do you think were the top female crimes committed in the United States of America in 2017 in comparison to their crime statistics records? So if you can, bullet point, what do you think are the top 3 crimes committed by women in the USA in 2017? Well, here they are. Number 1 top crime was minor property crimes, e.g. theft. 2 was fraud and embezzlement. Fraud is where you cheat money either out of the system or out of a person, so it's another type of theft. And shoplifting was number 3. I think that this is quite interesting because even though we are hundreds and hundreds of years apart from the medieval times, there are some links here, particularly with the crime of theft. So as I said earlier, theft was a problem in medieval times, but it was often because women had no other choice sometimes but to steal food. They struggled to find work. Even if they did get work, they were paid really terrible wages in comparison to men, and then as soon as they married they would be sacked from their jobs because it was argued that a woman's place was in the home and that she shouldn't be working if she was married. Well, that was 500 years ago, yet here we are. Still, the major crime, the main crimes that are being committed by women in the USA in 2017 are theft crimes. So I suppose you could argue, particularly if you watch the clip from last lesson, which talked about the pay gap and inequalities between men and women, perhaps maybe there's some connection here. I don't know. What do you think? So thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you next lesson.